Has the Jurassic World Hammond Collection officially fallen off? Or am I just being a little dramatic? Spoiler warning, I'm always dramatic, but still watch the video to find out. I'm Gary the Gremlin, but I can't deal with that now because today we're looking at the Jurassic World Hammond Collection Mussaurus and Ornitholestes. These two are part of the newest wave of the Hammond Collection that also included last week's review, the Sinoceratops, and also the Dryosaurus. This is where I'd put my Dryosaurus if I had one. The back of this packaging shows the full wave, and it sure seems subject to availability because some of these are impossible to find. Dryo hasn't even appeared in the Target website yet. The only place you can find it online, it's usually 3 to 5 times the price. I opened these toys live on stream, well, at least one of them, but that won't stop me from talking about the box still. Oh, Mattel. My sweet summer child, Mattel, what in the Tyrannosaur piss is going on here? I am not 100% sure, but my AI artwork detecting Spidey sense is going off big time. If I didn't know any better, I'd say some intern in the art department at Mattel ran photos of these figures through some generative AI program to make these images. What do you think? Is this AI? There's just something about how generic and bland these illustrations look, with a bit of that odd bug-eyed look and a little bit of unfinished textures. Look at this nostril on the Ornitholestes. That's not an actual functional nostril that leads to somewhere down in the skull. It looks like a shallow crater on its face. It doesn't look like an informed human artist designed this because they understood what a nostril is. It looks like an AI copied and assimilated other people's artwork, but didn't really know that this hole on the nose is supposed to actually be doing something. It just put it there. To me, if this is truly AI, this is so disappointing to see. Imagine if all the toys you grew up on had this bland, crappy AI art. Imagine Dino Riders or Kenner Jurassic Park without that loving attention, and instead with hastily crapped out clanker art made by stealing other people's artwork. It's a good thing I'm not an inbox collector, so these can go straight in the trash. Mussaurus and Ornitholestes sure are interesting choices for the Hammond Collection line. It's got me questioning this True FX logo in the top right corner of the box. True FX to what? These guys are just barely canon. Surprise story time! We're diving deep into Jurassic Park history to bring you the stories of these two scraggly little dino freaks. Introduce the Bible. We're doing this by the book, and by that, I mean The Lost World by Michael Crichton. Considering that 99% of my audience aren't old enough to drink, hell, most of you aren't old enough to drive, and you definitely shouldn't be drinking and driving, but, even more than that, you may not know that Jurassic Park is based on a book by the same name. And in the sequel, the aforementioned Lost World by Michael Crichton, there's a bunch of really cool new dinosaurs introduced and described. There's also Mussaurus and Ornitholestes, which are both so briefly mentioned that I did not remember them at all being in the book, and neither did you. Why Mattel chose to start with these out of all the novel species they could have picked from? Well, I guess it makes sense. These are among the few animals mentioned in the novel that would fit into this small size. I personally would have preferred the pterodactyls from the first book, or a novel version of the velociraptors, but these technically make sense for a choice. I mean, technically. They were there, if only very briefly mentioned. I hope this is simply foreshadowing for more novel figures, because I'd love a version of the novel juvenile T-Rex, the Dilophosaurus, or Carnotaurus. Starting with these alone is sort of slim pickings. Not really the way to introduce a whole new direction for the line. Not to mention, they're wrong. You can put up the nerd emoji, go ahead, comment Goofy the Gremlin all you want, but I've done my homework, unlike Mattel. Page 43, Mussaurus, is described as being a greenish brown. Page 21, Ornitholestes is described as being green with a dark patterning. So right off the bat, It seems a little concerning for the potential future of novel figures if they're immediately ignoring the source material. What's next? Will the novel raptors have cheetah spots? Or will they be bright pink? Will the novel T-Rex be blue? It sounds ridiculous, but based on this, I wouldn't put it past Mattel. That is all to say, I've got my personal grievances with these figures. These should appeal directly to me. I am the biggest fan of the books. I genuinely love them more than the movies. They're the best Jurassic Park material out there. Highly articulated, well-detailed, collector-oriented figures specifically made after the novel designs? Well, you could say, it's right up my alley. Sign me up. The question now is, do these figures deliver on that promise?
Was that the bite of 87?
Starting with Mussaurus, I actually really like this one. Though not really accurate at all to the dinosaur the novel describes, this one still stands apart in its own unique way in the collection. It's just nice to have another calm little herbivore to run around. Those usually end up being my favorite guys. I love a chiller like Moosey here. Mussaurus is an honestly rather amazing dinosaur. The first discovery of it was teeny tiny bones of an infant, which is why the name is Mussaurus, meaning mouse lizard because the babies were so darn cute and small. Mussaurus was an early Jurassic sauropodomorph and was something like a distant great-great-great-grandparent to the sauropods that would later come along, like Diplodocus and Brachiosaurus. You can still tell it from looking at his long neck and even longer tail, though I wouldn't blame you for not knowing it first glance. There's a noticeable size difference happening here. As for the design of the figure, I find this head sculpt maybe just a little bit alarming. He looks a bit disgruntled. Initially, this shrink-wrapped beak face was enough to turn me off the whole figure. Looks a little too turtley for the Turtle Club, if you know what I mean.
Is he okay?
Bringing up Master of Disguise in the big 2025 feels like Vietnam flashbacks. Anyways, after spending a lot of time with this happy herbivore, I think I've come around on it. I still don't really like the look of his mean mug, but it doesn't bother me anymore. I think it's really just the texture of the skin. I'm so used to seeing paleo art of dinosaurs that have smooth skin and always look nice and happy and a little plump, like they just finished Christmas dinner. This one is comparatively a little hungry looking. The sculpt work here is overall very nice, with a great mottled texture over the whole body and these little rows of osteoderms going down the back and the length of the tail. There are these especially noticeable scales on the thighs that seem maybe a little too distinctive. I think that's what I don't like about the figure overall. It looks a little too cartoony. I think this is often a problem Mattel has when tackling species that don't have a set canon appearance. This figure is very well detailed, but I wouldn't necessarily call it on par with some of Mattel's own work from within the Hammond Collection. Whenever Mattel doesn't have a reference model to work off, they seem to default to as many bumps and scales and cartoony dinosaur effects as possible. Fortunately, what doesn't feel phoned in is this figure's articulation. Yeah, I know it's early on, but posing time. This is really an area where I think the figure shines. Starting with the head, you've got a nice opening jaw, revealing his freshly cut veneers. Ew. Next up, a swivel and hinge at the back of the head, and a swivel and hinge at the base of the neck. This gives a more than functional range of motion, but I honestly like when they use ball joints so much more. It'd be nice to be able to give him a sort of quizzical stare, but with this joint, it can't happen. The shoulders have a full swivel as well as a great range hinging outward. The elbows have a really fantastic swivel and hinge, and the hands are just fine. I wouldn't mind for them to hinge a little bit more, but I've got more to say on the hands later. Hold your horses there, partner. The thighs have very little range outwards, but a great rotation. Knees hinge and swivel, and so do the ankles, no problem. I wish there was a lower foot joint like most other figures get, because this chunk of a foot is a bit limited. Rounding it out, we've got a ball joint at the base of the tail and a bendy wire down through the length of it. Bar those ankles, the articulation here is really great. It's a relative improvement over previous small-scale Hammond Collection figures. The tail is really nice, as well as the arm range, and I'm especially glad to see the addition of these wrist joints. I believe a Hammond Collection first. Hell, there are medium-scale figures missing wrist joints, but they managed to squeeze these tiny little ones on this figure. I'm really grateful for that. It's awesome. There's also more surprises in store, because this figure has swappable hands. You've got these flat hands, good for all your quadrupedal poses, and then these grabby hands, good for, grabbing things. Oh my god. This is such a nice feature to add, and I really love it. It's especially great here on a dinosaur like Mussaurus that would have regularly switched between walking on 2 legs or 4 for its locomotion. Every night I pray to Raptor Jesus that one day we'll get a Hammond Collection figure of that gorgeous Jurassic World Dominion Parasaurolophus design, and that would seem like another great figure to include these swappable hands on. Lord knows the first Parasaurolophus could have used them. On the Mussasaurus's front foot, there is the slightest paint mishap on one toe. Looks like they just accidentally dapped a little extra on there. It is really great to see all the claws are painted, however. That's another area this line has completely changed and improved on itself. Some of those older figures had nothing on any of the claws. I'm looking at you, Anki. Overall, the colors here are pretty good, even if not accurate to the book. The base of the body has this very dark, almost gray shade of blue that fades into this sleepy grayish tan color. Then, lining the entire of the body are seemingly sporadic and random stripes of blue. I've been trying, and I can't tell what, if any, sort of pattern there's supposed to be here. There's 2 different shades of bright blue alone on the tail, with this teal underlining the bright blue on the back, and this dark navy blue on the back of the head. It's so dark, it's almost the same color as the gray, and it's hardly noticeable. I really like it though, and I wish that was the color they had used for the entirety of the figure's body. I'd really like if there was something here to cause more contrast, like if the underbelly was much brighter or the stripes were much starker. I actually really like the deco on the mainline Mattel Mussasaurus a lot more, maybe something more like that. Either way, the Mussasaurus does still do a pretty good job of standing out in a lineup with some other Hammond Collection figures due to how dark it is. Speaking of other Hammond Collection figures, let's do a size comparison. Stood in a normal quadrupedal pose, the Hammond Collection Mussasaurus is 3 inches to the top of its back and right at 8 inches long from snout to tail tip. This is kind of the perfect size for this figure, but I'll explain that in a second. First up, Action Master Grimlock, Gary the Gremlin Council of Raptors, and some 1/18th scale human figures. And for those Hammond Collection comparisons, the sauropodlet Snacker himself, the Ornitholestes, Wavemate Sinoceratops, Carnotaurus, Giganotosaurus, and last, his 800th time removed grandson, the Brachiosaurus. You can barely see Moosey in this shot, it is so small next to the Brachiosaurus. And the reason this is the perfect size for this Mussasaurus figure is twofold. Most obviously, I mean, it's about perfectly accurate as next to a 1/18th scale human. But additionally, this is sneakily the first Hammond Collection 1-to-1 scale figure. Back to good old page 43 in The Lost World, the book describes the Mussasaurus as just a couple inches long, big enough to stand in your hand. If this toy were trying to be accurate to the novel, it is of course oversized next to our human characters. Most of the Hammond Collection small-sized figures are. In the movie, the Dilophosaurus and Stygimoloch aren't even up to the height of someone's waist. In this toy line, they're both taller than a 1/18th scale Little Jeff. It's just how it goes. But if we consider the Mussasaurus as in scale with me, it's perfect. This is perfectly scaled for a baby Mussasaurus, and that really endears this figure to me. Gary the Gremlin side rant, where are the 1-to-1 scale Hammond Collection figures? Right? A life-size Compsognathus would be about the same height and length as the Hammond Collection Spinosaurus. Why haven't we gotten that? The baby raptors are easily small enough to fit in the medium scale. They're just under a foot long in length and barely taller than 6 inches tall. I'm just really excited thinking about the untapped potential here. A life-size Jurassic Park 3 baby pteranodon would be about the same height as the Hammond Collection Brachiosaurus, and it might just be my new dream figure. Hear me out, Mattel. And overall, I really like this Mussaurus. If we were doing a good, bad, and the ugly structure again, like the Stiggy Moloch review, he'd probably get ugly for that nasty turtle scowl. But I still really like this figure. It's the kind I wouldn't mind getting 3 or 4 of total to build a little army of them. Maybe I'll get another and try to repaint it to match those novel colors. That 1-to-1 scale realization really turned around my opinion on him. It's wonderful to have a little guy who's quite literally, canonically, a little guy.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass on, boy.
And if we keep up with that good, bad, and the ugly thing, well, I think it's safe to say that the Dryosaurus has earned the good, because I am not a fan of the Ornitholestes. Mattel, what was going on? Look at this thick-ass tail right there. I am not a shrink wrapper. I like my dinosaurs with some girth on them, but this is a little too much, and it's all in the trunk. Low-key looks like he's using his tail as a fat deposit or something, like a camel. That face looks a little empty, as well as having a really rough underbite. I feel like we're verging dangerously close to tiger raptor territory here. So right off the bat, we've got some slightly strange proportions. Not the worst we've ever seen, but it's just strange. Frankly, to me, this feels like a nothing burger of a figure. There's some positives here and some negatives, but overall, I feel like this figure has the least precedent for existing out of all the Hammond Collection releases. At least with stuff like Irritator, it appeared in a video game, no matter how obscure, and Scutosaurus is based off the Kinner figure, but this species appears as a corpse that's already rotted and bloated beyond recognition in a book. I understand making toys of the novel figures, and it's a thing I really want, but this is scraping the bottom of the barrel, guys. It also just doesn't look much like an Ornitholestes. It's been sort of generalized and raptorified, and now it just looks like a generic raptor thing. Going back to the drawing board, going back to the blueprints, I think there's 2 ways Mattel could have gone for the design of this figure. Either outdated and inaccurate, or new and realistic. The familiar version of Ornitholestes most people know is a now outdated reconstruction. It turns out it did not in fact have the iconic nose crest, and it did have raptor-like claws on its feet. You think you know a guy and then you learn his iconic nose crest was all a lie. In reality, Ornitholestes, or as I will be calling him for the rest of the video, Ornitholestes, was much more of a base coelurosaur that had a slightly longer neck and likely would have been heavily feathered. And those are the 2 options you could go for when making a figure. Crest or feathered. Either design would have done a good job at setting it apart from all the other small theropods in the line, right? And to astound everyone, even including myself, and to commit a great Gary the Gremlin grievance, this is the one time I think I would have preferred it to be inaccurate. I know, crazy, right? No, it's not Opposite Day, and no, I haven't finally lost it. It's actually all based on the good book. The novel version of the Ornitholestes isn't said to have a nose crest per se, being a corpse washed up on the beach. It's mostly mangled beyond identification, but if it were alive, and based on what scientists at the time thought it looked like, I assume it would have had a crest. Since this is supposed to be a toy based on the Ornitholestes as it kind of appeared in the Lost World, I think it would be accurate to make it green, like the book describes, and to go ahead and give it the damn crest. Sure, why not? He's earned it. It's surely what Michael Crichton was picturing in his mind's eye when he wrote that part. But Mattel chose to have their bird and eat it too. That's our second pun on Ornitholestes' name because it translates to bird thief. Have their bird eat it too. Okay, the more you know. Instead of either of the distinctive Ornitholestes designs, they went with both. This figure appears to me as sort of the proportions and face of a 90s inaccurate Ornitholestes with half-assed feathers and details from a modern Ornitholestes. If you want to know what I think, I think Mattel just ornithogestes on what the book described it as. Okay. This is really the most pathetic attempt at a feather covering I've ever seen on a figure. They don't really look like plumage, they honestly more resemble scales that have seemingly just grown longer. Now, from a genetic standpoint, that is what feathers are in the first place, but that's beside the point. The back of the head is a scruffy-like covering of sculpted feathers that suddenly stops as soon as you reach the back of the head. What? The neck is completely naked. Then the feathers begin again on the torso and go on right the way down most of the tail. Why has he got a naked neck, the poor fella? I genuinely would not be surprised if this was just someone at Mattel forgetting to add texturing to this piece. No one in their right mind would design it to look this bad, right? Right? Of course, none of this is helped by how vaguely the feathers sleepily fade into the sculpt of the skin or by the lackluster paintwork. There's just a really odd implementation of feathers here. Sorry, not odd, lazy. It's lazy on Mattel's part to half-ass the sculpt work and then not really bother to paint it. And that's kind of what bugs me about the whole figure. This one doesn't feel creative or interesting at all. The Mussaurus clearly stands out among all the other dinosaurs in the line as the only prosauropod and as a decently cute and interesting figure. But by Jurassic Worldifying and Ornitholestes, Mattel's just kind of made another raptor for the Hammond Collection line. Does Mattel have a quota of raptor-like creatures to fill every year? They can't go one wave without making something with a killer claw. It feels extra silly to get a raptorified Ornitholestes when they haven't even finished all the actual raptors yet. They still have Echo, Charlie, and all of the Atrociraptor squad to make, and they're pumping out bland raptorified Ornitholestes? If they wanted to do a small-scale carnivore, I would have much rather taken a Jurassic Park the Game Herarosaurus over this. It's not helping matters that the quality control on this figure isn't that great either. Both of the eyes on my copy are slightly misprinted, though the one on his right side is a lot worse. More and more as I'm getting this wave, I'm missing the glass eyes. Never once did I have a glass eye misprinted, because that was a problem you fundamentally couldn't have with them. They weren't printed. In addition, on these big old clown feet, there's a giant glob of black paint that must have rubbed off a toe or something. And then last, there's this random paint splash that suspiciously looks like a number right here on his crotch. I joke, of course, but this code looks a little obvious here. I wish they'd put it somewhere else. Fun fact, I happen to have a matching tattoo on my crotch, but I don't think you can show that on YouTube. Anyways, I don't think the colors here are bad on their own. In fact, I like them, but on top of that sculpting and in context of the entire line, I wish they would have gone with the green the book describes. There's already plenty of orange dinosaurs in the Hammond Collection, and while there's even more green ones, there's not one that's a bright lime green, which is what I would have made this figure. Something reminiscent of a tree frog would be striking and cool. Once again, maybe this could be a subject for a repaint, who knows? I hear it like the Green Goblin mask calling for me to pick up the brush. Same as the Mussaurus, we've got some swappable hands here, which is a nice added bonus, but also feels more out of place here. I'm not going to turn down swappable parts, but here we just have grabbing hands and a slightly more open set of grabbing hands. At least it made sense with the Mussaurus because it was to make different options for walking. This just feels a little extra. There'd be nothing to complain about if this wrist joint wasn't so loose, which makes swapping the parts repeatedly feel uncomfortable. Speaking of loose joints, articulation time. Yay. The mouth has got a pretty decent hinge, back of the head has a full swivel and hinge, the naked neck has got a swivel and hinge at its base with a really great range of motion, and then the shoulder makes me want to throw him out a window. They made a fun word for that, by the way. It's called defenestration. Great stuff. The right shoulder is completely gone straight out of the box. Can barely hold a pose, flaps around like nobody's business. I mean, it's got a great range of motion, full swivel, great range on that hinge, but that's not worth squat if it can't hold a pose. The rest of the arm joints aren't as loose, but they do feel uncomfortable. They're so small and so thin I could easily see them breaking, and all of the joints feel loose already. The thigh has got just the slightest bit of outwards movement, while the rotation is pretty good. Knees swivel and hinge, ankles swivel and hinge, and then the toes both swivel and hinge as well. That's the kind of joint it would have been great to see on the Mussaurus as well. Last thing, we've got a ball joint at the base of the tail, and then a bendy wire down through the rest of that big fat slug of a tail. The articulation here is great, even better than on the Mussaurus, mostly due to that ankle joint. The wrist joints are such a game changer for these small scale figures as well. It's not worth anything to me though, if it can't hold up to basic posing. Make sure to let me know down in the comments below if your figure has had any similar problems. This could just be my copy, but knowing how poor Mattel's quality control is, this could be an unfortunately common thing. As for a size comparison, the Hammond Collection Ornitholestes is practically the exact same size as the Mussaurus, at 3 inches tall to the top of the back and 8 inches from snout to tail tip. This makes it about bang on for 1/18 scale, though the proportions are so wildly wrong that it doesn't really mean squat anyways. Here it is with Action Master Grimlock, the Gary the Gremlin Council of Raptors, some 1/18 scale humans, the Mussaurus, the Sinoceratops, the Carnotaurus, and the Giganotosaurus. Honestly, at this point, I feel like this half of the video has been the Buck T-Rex video all over again. What's the point of making the Buck T-Rex if you're not going to do the sculpt properly or get the colors right? And similarly, what's the point of novel dinosaurs if you don't base it off the novel descriptions and then just half-ass all the design choices? These are fine little figures. Separated from what they're supposed to be, they're actually pretty good. The Mussaurus honestly makes some really great improvements over previous figures and is the clear standout here. The Mussaurus gets Life Finds a Way tier, which is basically the same as A tier. It's a pretty good figure, but not quite good enough to get into Scutosaurus tier. The Ornitholestes, well, you might want to go ahead and Ornithoselectes a better figure to buy. This guy may be strangely easy to make puns about, but he really just feels like mediocrity and laziness as a figure. Ornitholestes gets Don't You Mean Extinct tier, which is basically equivalent to D tier. Combination of bad design and some really poor quality control means that this guy does not get high on the list. I'll have to get my hands on the Dryosaurus first before I can say anything definitive about it, but it's such a sadness that Mattel didn't do their homework on these, especially when it was right there for the reading. This was an open book exam and Mattel failed. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you for sticking around and listening to me talk on and on about these silly dinosaur toys. It means the world to me. That's about all I've got for this video, my Googly Gang. I hope you enjoyed. Do me a kindness, will you, and like, comment, and subscribe. Stay tuned for next week's video, as it's one of my favorite videos to make, the Gary the Gremlin Top 10 of the Year list. I promise you some big surprises with that video, so make sure to come back and watch it. I also want to extend a giant thank you to all my members. They are really what help keep these videos going, as their contribution each month helps keep these videos coming and the lights on my desk staying on. Alright, that's it for this one. See you next time. Gary the Gremlin, out.